Good evening and good morning. Good evening in Canada, in Montreal, and good morning in New Zealand. So today we have a match which is from day one. So it is actually one of the day one match which takes place after the day three of the group phase in the inter-university law debate tournament between two universities. We'll be debating on topics they received. We have Auckland University of Technology in Auckland, in New Zealand, and as well McGill University in Canada. So I'll give the floor to my colleague.
Thank you very much, and good day to the two teams, and of course to our judges and for taking their time to review the match. We thank you very much. And of course, a good day also to the supporters of the team. Today's topic is the topic of a day one match, which is that the states may disregard in their legislation international environmental law principles. Of course, in a short while, we'll find which side will be defended by which team. But before we get to that, I would like to invite the students for introductions, starting with McGill University. Mr. Haddad.
Hello, my name's Joe Haddad. I'm a student, second year law student at McGill University. Very happy to be here. I competed last year in the French edition of the competition, and really excited to be, participating in the English edition this year.
Thank you. Welcome from Auckland University of Technology, Mr. Thompson.
Good morning, good afternoon to Canada. My name is Tremaine Thompson. I am a second year Bachelor of Law student here at Auckland University of Technology. I'm very pleased to be here today.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Ribeiro Toy from McGill University.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a law student at McGill as well. And I'm very excited to face off against our Commonwealth adversaries today.
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Shatwal of Auckland University of Technology.
Hey guys, I'm Jez. I'm a second year law student at Auckland University of Technology. Looking forward to today and all the best.
In a short while, you should be able to see the screen with the wheel that will allocate the positions for this debate.
Yes.
Just confirm when you can see it.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So as you can see, there are two possibilities for each team to be in favor or to be against the motion. The team in favor will be starting the match with the first introduction. For this match, McGill University will be in favor and will be starting the match with the first introduction. As a consequence, Auckland University of Technology will be against the motion. Now you will have 5 minutes to review your notes, and then we hear the introduction by McGill University. Voilà.
Thank you very much. The time for final preparation has now passed. We are also joined by Ms. Lal from the organizing team. But again, without further ado, giving the time for the opening statement of 4 minutes to McGill University team. Just a short reminder, you will also get visual cues for your speaking times. Yellow for 30 seconds and red for speaking time over. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Members of the jury, one thing is undisputed. Environmental protection is now a matter of global concern which affects all states. And international environmental law has developed a wide range of principles to respond to these challenges. But not every principle carries the same legal force. Some are binding obligations. Others are broad guidelines, political commitments, or interpretive aspirations that influence state conduct without strictly determining it. Now, the issue before this jury is whether states may disregard international environmental law principles in their legislation. In other words, does the mere existence of an international environmental principle automatically require domestic legislatures to incorporate it into national law? We submit that it does not. States may disregard, they have the choice to disregard, such principles in their legislation. Let me begin with a few definitions. When we say may disregard, we're not saying they should disregard. We're simply referring to the legal capacity, the autonomy, the sovereignty of states to decline to fully or partially incorporate, apply, or give effect to guiding environmental principles in their domestic legislation. International environmental law principles refers to broad normative standards such as precaution, sustainable development, the polluter pays principle, which often guide international environmental governance but do not always exist as binding, actionable legal rules. They're principles, not treaties. We will present two submissions. The first one, I will submit that states have the choice to disregard international environmental law principles because many of those principles are soft law rather than binding legal obligations. Second, my colleague will submit that even where international environmental law is binding on states, domestic effect still depends on the state's constitutional system and its domestic legislative process. Each submission will be asserted according to the IRAC method, issue, rule, application, and conclusion. My first submission is that states have the choice to disregard international environmental law principles because many of those principles are not directly actionable rules of law. Members of the jury, the other side will treat the word principle as if it automatically means law. That is not how international law works. A norm is binding because of its source, not because of its title. Article 38 of the ICJ's statute tells us that what the sources of law are, and many environmental principles come from declarations like Stockholm and Rio, which the UN itself says are formally non-binding. And ITLOS confirms the same logic in 2011. Rio Principle 15 was a non-binding statement until binding regulations transformed it into a legal obligation. So the correct rule is this. Environmental principles are usually soft law first, and they become hard law only if treaty law, custom, or some other recognized source gives them binding force. Applying that rule, the motion must be affirmed. As I stated, many international environmental principles come from soft law instruments, and the UN is clear that these principles are not always legally binding. So if a state decides not to codify one of those principles, it has not necessarily broken the law. In other words, yes, these principles matter. Yes, they guide states, but guiding is not binding. Unless a principle has hardened into treaty law or into custom, a state may still have the choice to disregard it, whether fully or partially, in its domestic legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opening statement in the against position. Auckland University of Technology, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honourable judges, international environmental law is built on principles, but those principles are not optional. They are foundational. This case turns on a single question. May states disregard international environmental law principles when legislating? We say that they may not. Our case proceeds in 3 steps. First, many environmental principles reflect binding customary international law. Second, even when not binding, they are legally operative and guide obligations. And third, allowing states to disregard them undermines consistency and the rule of law. We begin with the legal status of these principles. Some principles are not merely aspirational, they are recognized as binding rules of international law. The clearest example is the principle of prevention of transboundary harm. In the Trail Smelter arbitration, the tribunal held that a state must not use its territory in a way that causes serious environmental harm to another state. That principle has since been affirmed by the International Court of Justice. In pulp mills on the River Uruguay 2010, the court confirmed that states have a due diligence obligation to prevent significant transboundary harm. That is not guidance. That is law. So what this shows is clear. At least some environmental principles are binding and cannot be disregarded. But even where principles are not independently binding, they still play a legal role. International environmental law operates through a combination of treaties, customary rules, and general principles. The International Court of Justice recognizes this. In Gabčíkovo and Nagimaros, 1997, the court referred to sustainable development as a key concept, guiding how environmental obligations are interpreted. And in pulp mills, the court emphasized the importance of environmental impact assessment, reflecting precautionary reasoning. So even where principles are not binding rules, they shape how binding law operates. They are not optional considerations. They are part of the legal framework itself. And this leads to the central problem with the proposition. If states may disregard these principles, they may ignore the very standards that give environmental law coherence. International environmental law depends on consistency, on predictability, and on cooperation. Allowing states to disregard principles creates fragmentation. It essentially allows states to selectively interpret obligations and avoid meaningful environmental protection. That is not flexibility. That is erosion. And this matters in practice. Environmental harm, climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss is inherently transboundary. Without shared principles, there is no shared standard. So what follows is unavoidable. Disregarding principles undermines the system itself. So stepping back, this case is not about rigid rules. It is about maintaining a functioning legal framework. Because international environmental law does not operate in isolation, it operates through principles. Some are binding, and others guide the application of binding law, but none are irrelevant. And if states may disregard them, they may disregard the coherence of the law itself. For those reasons, we ask you, honourable judges, to reject the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This marks the opening statements. Proceeding to hear the first rebuttal for the in favor position. McGill University team, 2 minutes.
Members of the jury, our argument is narrow, but it is decisive. Even where a treaty binds a state on the international plane, that does not mean that the treaty principle automatically writes itself into the domestic legislation of the state. And international obligations and domestic legal effects are not the same thing. And that distinction is basic to public law. As everyone in the public law sphere knows, the OHCHR explains that monetist states or monetist systems, treaties may enter domestic law automatically. But in dualist systems, treaties become part of national law only when enacted through a legislative incorporation. And when implementation has not occurred, Parliament does not have the obligation to enact that necessarily into that legislation. And that is extremely interesting in what is called federated states like Canada, the United States, or Brazil. An abiding treaty that's signed by the sovereign state does not rewrite the constitution of many states. And some powers are given to either a province or a state in such way that the competency or the jurisdiction to enact that legislation falls within the federated entity and not the sovereign entity. And a few examples is Baker v. Canada, where the Supreme Court of Canada states that we are in a dualist system. Meddling v. Texas, where the United States Supreme Courts also reaffirmed that the United States do not have to follow what is signed by the United States. So even if an environmental principle is binding internationally, that alone does not compel its automatic legislative adoption at home if that violates its constitutional structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First rebuttal by Auckland University of Technology. 2 minutes.
The claim that the opposition contend overlooks fundamental legal consequences under international law for disregarding international environmental law principles. States operate at a global level, it's well known, and they are members of the international legal system, and that imposes obligations of accountability. Where a state fails to comply with established environmental principles, particularly those that are tied to climate protection or transboundary harm, as my colleague alluded to, and these are outlined in the ICJ and the UN framework on climate change. This risks breaching state responsibility for upholding these internationally agreed policies. Domestic law can't be used as a justification for non-compliance with international obligations. And this has been reflected in the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. A state cannot simply just point to its own legislation and claim exemption from liability if it has no environmental principles listed in its legislation. If its domestic framework falls short of international standards, there is a breach. An example of breaching is found in the Corfu Channel case from 1949. And in that, the ICJ made Armenia was made to pay the UK today's equivalent of £38 million. And for my Canadian colleagues, that's close to 70 million Canadian dollars in damages. Why should states risk being penalized for principles that are customary international law anyways? Further consequences can expose them to further repercussions and reputational damage, diplomatic or economic repercussions, and therefore, while a state may attempt to disregard such principles internally, it does so at the cost of violating binding international obligations.
Thank you. McGill University, second rebuttal.
Thank you. Members of the jury, the other side acknowledges that some environmental principles are so foundational and so widely accepted that states cannot simply disregard them in domestic legislation. Some is the key word here. All principles are different, so states must be able to choose which principles to apply and how to apply them, whether fully or partially. And yes, many environmental principles are widely invoked. Yes, they are important. But in international law, repetition and moral appeal do not automatically create a binding legal obligation. What matters is whether the principle has actually become hard law through treaty or customary international law, as my opposition colleagues have rightfully noted. Until then, it remains soft law. Certainly persuasive, influential, politically significant, but not automatically binding on domestic legislatures. The other side also tries to collapse two separate questions into one. The first question is whether a principle has international relevance. The second is whether that principle must be enacted domestically. Those are not the same. A principle may guide international conduct without compelling national legislation. And if we erase that distinction, then every declaration, every aspiration, and every policy standard becomes a legislative command. And that is not law, my friends. That is simply policy preference dressed up as a legal obligation. And even where a principle reflects a genuine international obligation, the domestic result is still not automatic. There are constitutional and legislative choices to be made about whether, how, and to what extent that obligation will be incorporated into domestic law. So the existence of a principle, even an important one, does not defeat our motion. Thank you.
Thank you. For the second rebuttal in the against position, Auckland University of Technology.
The opposition contend that states are sovereign and therefore should direct their legislation as they see fit or whatever is in line with the country's capacity, irrespective of international environmental law. However, the presumption of consistency overrides the legislature's silence. For example, in New Zealand, as cited in New Zealand Journal of International and Public Law, it states that even when the legislature appears to disregard international principles, the judiciary applies the presumption of consistency. The presumption requires that, where possible, courts should interpret domestic legislation in a manner that aligns with international obligations. In practice, this means that even ambiguous or broadly worded statutes are read in light of existing international commitments. And this has been affirmed in cases such as THIULDT and the Minister of Immigration in the New Zealand Court of Appeal. Here, the court emphasised that it would be unattractive for decision makers to just ignore relevant international obligations. The court applies international legal principles to guide the application and the meaning of domestic statute, but have strongly expressed the need for domestic legislation to be reflective of international policy. A famous quote from the case, President Cook of the Court of Appeal rejected the Crown's argument at the time, which was that the minister was entitled to just disregard international law provisions. And he stated this was a form of window dressing, where New Zealand would publicly commit to international obligations, but then fail to give them hard law effect domestically. This also highlights the principle of integrity and avoiding hypocrisy. So this creates legal pressure to uphold and maintain legislation in line with the obligations internationally.
Thank you very much. This marks the end of rebuttals. For the closing statements, McGill University, 2 minutes.
Members of the jury, the flaw in the other side's arguments is not that their authorities are unimportant. It is that their authorities do not prove what they say they are proving. They invoke Article 27 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, but Article 27 says only that states cannot rely on its internal law to justify a failure to perform the treaty internationally. It does not say that the state has the internal responsibility of enacting that treaty. Further, they invoke the Curfew Channel, which is a case from 1949, but the Curfew Channel stands for vigilance and responsibility between states. It says that a state must not knowingly allow its territory to be used for rights contrary to the rights of other states. Again, this is a principle of responsibility of the international plane, and it does not erase the constitutional structure that might arise in a federated state. And finally, they just mentioned the New Zealand Court of Appeal case, and with respect, the New Zealand constitutional structure does not impose that other states follow the same analysis that their Court of Appeal follow. As a domestic court, although their judges have a thoughtful analysis, it doesn't force other judges in other countries to impose that the states or federated states use the principles of international law where the Constitution does not permit that. Our position, however, is much simpler, narrower, and legally sound. First, we submitted that many state principles remain exactly that, principles: precaution, sustainable development, intergenerational equity, and they are often influential. In law, a norm binds them because they are recognized from a legal source, but until they are recognized from a legal source, they are only soft law. And our second submission was that even where an internal obligation is truly binding, domestic effect must depend on the constitutional structure. Thank you very much, judges.
Thank you. For concluding statements, Auckland University of Technology.
Thank you. Honourable Judges, the proposition wants you to believe that international environmental law principles are optional, that states may simply disregard them. But that proposition cannot be sustained in law. They say these principles are not binding and therefore may be ignored, but that is not how international law works. Some of these principles, like the prevention of transboundary harm, are firmly established in customary international law, recognized in Trail Smelter and reaffirmed by the International Court of Justice in Pulp Mills as part of the obligation of due diligence. That is not guidance. That is the law. And even where principles are not independently binding, they still shape how binding obligations operate. They are not optional, they are foundational. And even domestically, the law resists disregard. In THIULDT and the Minister of Immigration, the New Zealand Court of Appeal made clear, as my colleague said, that it is unattractive for decision makers to ignore international obligations, because doing so turns international commitments into empty promises. That doesn't just sit at the domestic level, as the proposition implied. At the international level, the consequences are even clearer. Under the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties, which the opposition used as a whole, not mentioning any specific article, a state cannot rely on its domestic law to justify failure to comply with international obligations. So if a state legislates in a way that disregards core environmental principles, it risks breaching its obligations and engaging international responsibility. Disregard is not flexibility, it is non-compliance. So the real issue in this case is not whether principles are treaties, the issue is whether states can ignore the legal framework those principles create, and the answer is no. So thank you, honourable judges.
Thank you to both teams and congratulations on ending and completing your match. I think both teams did very well, so good job. You're no longer assessed from this point, so feel free to relax. And yes, this officially marks your final match, even though it is your day one match. So as always, we will quickly reflect on the match that we just had, which includes preparations, how we found the topic itself, research, and of course, debating before we move on to networking. So starting off with our reflections, starting of course with the team from Auckland University of Technology, could we hear from Mr. Jas Chitwal, please?
Thank you. That was brilliant from both sides. Just some reflection on the topic as a whole. I did find it quite enjoyable. It's interesting analyzing, how domestic policy intersects with international policy. There was that idea of dualism and modalism and how they intersect. Research was very good. We felt prepared and ready for today, and the opponents put up a very good argument, and they should be quite pleased with themselves as well.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Haddad from McGill University, how did you find the match?
I agree. I always enjoy exploring the intersection between international law and kind of domestic ratification. It was a very nice topic, very interesting to kind of delve into the nuances and how to defend our position. But yeah, it was a nice intellectual exercise. We prepared as much as we can, and I guess did our best.
Thank you so much. Same question to Mr. Thompson from AUT, please.
Yeah, I just want to reflect the statements made by Mr. Chatwal and Mr. Haddad. That was a great debate. The topic was outside of our expertise and possibly comfort zones. But I think that's where some of the most robust research and debate happens, is when you're pushed to your limits or pushed outside of those limits and really having to dig deep into those arguments. So well done to McGill University. That was a really great match.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And then finally, Mr. Ribeiro Toa, please.
Yeah, like what everyone said, it's a very interesting topic, one that is also outside of our comfort zone. So we I guess both teams had to catch up on international public law this week. It's a great, I think it was a great debate. A very, I think it's like one of those debates where one side is very morally strong and the other side is very legally strong, and they kind of, you try to play with either the morality or you play with the law. And I just want to say before closing off, that my friend Haddad did say my friends don't like, he said my friends, and just because in Canada we refer to opposing counsel as my friends, it's not like, I know once I said that to an American and they were a bit shocked that I was calling them my friends in court, but it's just that in Canada we refer to opposing counsel as my friends. But I just wanted to clarify that because I don't think Mr. Haddad knows that in other countries that is not the norm.
We're Commonwealth countries, so we use the same terminology.
Okay, sounds
And
good.
we're Canadian.
Thank you for sharing. And yes, of course, I think very friendly energy from both sides. So thank you so much. Okay, so now moving on to the networking questions. I think both teams do know the vibes really well, but we'll still get to know each other better. So starting off with our first question, which is, how was it representing your university in the tournament? And how was the process of being selected like? So this time starting off with McGill University. Any of the members are, yeah, just feel free to chime in. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So well, maybe I'll just start. Representing McGill is obviously an honor. I really like the university. I've met some amazing people, especially the faculty of law, including Mr. Ribeiro-Tois, in the context of this competition. For the selection process, I approached one of our faculty advisors, and I had mentioned my interest in being part of that debate, and they were like, okay, you know what, we'll put out a statement and see who's interested in joining. That's when Mr. Ribeiro reached out, and then we both kind of met in the context of this competition, and now we're very good friends. So yeah.
Mr. Ribeiro-Tois, is there anything that you'd like to add to that? Okay, you're good.
That sounds like the full story.
All good. Thank you. Thank you so much. The same question to AUT. So basically, what was the selection process like, and how is it like representing your university?
Yeah, it's an absolute honor to represent AUT, Auckland University of Technology. The first time that we've entered into this competition, and not only our university but our country as a whole. We're the only team from New Zealand after the withdrawal of the University of Waikato. So to be able to represent New Zealand and bring in some of the legal work that our country is doing through that domestic law, it's a real honor and privilege. And yeah, the selection process, there wasn't much to it. We have quite a heavy law degree here in New Zealand, and so there's not a lot of time for students to enter into competitions like this. So to be able to kind of carry that mantle and represent AUT, represent South Auckland law students, represent New Zealand, again, just a real honor and privilege.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And now for the second question, and that is, if the opposing team were to visit your city or country, what place, institution, or experience would best reflect your legal or academic culture? Starting off with McGill once again, please.
I'll say, so it's quite interesting because in Canada we have two systems of law. So we have common law and civil law, and they operate quite differently. So I would say it would be very interesting for you guys to listen to maybe a civil law trial because it's less case law heavy and much more statutory heavy. So we have the Civil Code of Quebec. So that's that. Our Supreme Court is a very nice building. If you're ever in Ottawa, that's the only thing that you could do in Ottawa. So It's always a good stop. I say you guys have to visit absolutely Montreal because it's a very diverse city. Kind of looks like Europe. So you get that more of an artist type vibe. And if you guys like something that's close to North America or looks more a bit perhaps Americanized, then Toronto is a really good city because there's Dundas, and that kind of looks like Times Square. Um, a little bit like Times Square on a budget, but it's still, you're gonna still have to be, you're gonna be able to see Times Square, and yeah, I think that's that. If you want to visit the McGill Law School, we are the oldest law school in the country, and so we do have a lot of legal history here. But I think that wraps it up for our beautiful country.
So I would just add to that, the prairies are beautiful. I don't know if you've ever heard of Banff National Park. Has an amazing view. I'd encourage you to look it up. You can find photos, videos of it online. It's beautiful. There's a very nice river, beautiful mountains. Great to visit in the summer. Then there's, you could go along the coast to Vancouver, all the way to the west coast, which is closer to you folks in the Pacific. So yeah, there's a couple of cities, but the thing about Canada is it's very big, it's very wide, so you have to target certain cities, certain areas that you want to visit. But overall, a great country, and I do encourage you folks to visit it.
Awesome, thank you so much. The same question to AUT. Is there any place or institution in particular in Auckland or just New Zealand in general? So both members, please feel free to add on.
Again, sort of similar. Well, New Zealand's opposite in the sense that we're quite small by comparison to Canada. So some key touristy spots, I guess. We have our Sky Tower, the tallest building in New Zealand. There's some pretty beautiful spots in the South Island. So we've got the Alps, Southern Alps, that sort of thing. Mount Cook, a lot of nature walks, scenic, snowy mountain, that sort of vibe. The fjords, way down south, those are quite beautiful as well. Again, it's kind of sad I haven't been myself, so I'm talking just from knowledge but not experience. Institution-wise, our Supreme Court's not bad. Yeah, it's inside's quite nice, so check that out. Wellington's quite good as well. The Beehive, our Parliament building, that sort of thing. So, city-wise, Wellington, beautiful place, and Auckland, just to go check out the city nightlife, that sort of thing. But I'm sure Tremaine can speak more to it.
I think we should promote Jazz to being a tourism ambassador for our country. That was beautiful. But yeah, no, definitely our country, I think, very similar to Canada in terms of nature being quite a big draw card, and a culture as well. We're kind of the opposite to McGill in terms of university. We're the youngest law school in New Zealand, Auckland University of Technology. So not quite as much of an extensive legal history. We don't quite have any alumni in the judiciary yet, but one day we'll get there. However, our High Court building here in Auckland is beautiful. It is the first court that was built here in New Zealand in the late 1800s. So that would be a great place to go for legal.
Very friendly, and yes, we love to see the energy between both teams. And yes, once again, this marked the end of your day one match and of your pool stage match. So congratulations once again, and handing it back over to the host to wrap it up. And once again, great job to both teams, and yeah, all the best.
Thank you, indeed. Thank you to your teams. It's been a pleasure. Although you have started with day 2 and you are wrapping up with day 1, it's been a pleasure to see you progress with the debates. And really, congratulations on concluding your group phase. And the next event in your tournament journey is the mid-edition break event, which you will be receiving information via email soon. And not to spoil it too much, but there's quite a lot to look forward to, including meeting your fellow teammates from the oppositions from the group phase. And wrapping up by passing to Professor Lorange.
Yes, well done for this. I'm mute? Yes, I was mute. Yes, congratulations again for this match. The third match, it was very enjoyable to see the live debate actually on the topic. And we are looking forward as well to see you for the networking, because you have been as well quite appreciated. I know that many teams watch actually the match from the group A as well. And the group G and some others. So what I mean is that we are looking forward to see you connecting with the other teams, and as well during the next days, of course, you will receive the results of this match. So yeah, we encourage you to keep contact, and you never know if you want to visit each other as well between New Zealand and Canada. So that would be a great opportunity as well for collaboration, professional collaboration in the future even. So thank you, and wish you the best and for the next days. I mean, if you have some commitments, and we'll see you very soon at the mid-edition event for networking. So thank you again. Wish you a great evening in Canada and a great rest of the day on Tuesday in New Zealand. Thank you, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.